Respected sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا صلى الله عليه وآله عبده ورسوله وحافظ سره ومبلغ رسالاته وأشهد أن أهل بيته المعصومين حجج الحق على الخلق أجمعين وأبرأ إلى الله من أعدائهم من الأولين والآخرين عباد الله أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. Servants of Allah, I remind you all to be pious of Allah, to be righteous in all of your affairs, to be submissive to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to His commands and to His prohibitions, to know that to Allah we belong and to Him we shall return. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, verse 36 of chapter 43, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن يعش عن ذكر الرحمن نقيض له شيطانا فهو له قرين. And whoever is blinded from the remembrance of the Most Merciful, we appoint for him a Satan, and he is to him a companion. This holy verse warns against a detrimental spiritual disease, which is to give a blind eye to the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَنْ يَعْشُ عَنْ ذِكْرِ الرَّحْمَنِ. The concept of ashu, and this is a word from which Isha is derived from, and Asha is derived from. And generally, ashu is when somebody can't see clearly. And here the verse says, وَمَنْ يَعْشُ, one who chooses not to see clearly. In other words, chooses to give the blind eye to the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And here we're not talking about the physical eye, of course. The eyes that are blinded from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the eyes of the soul, the eyes of the heart. And these eyes, we control how much veils we put on them to prevent the light and the inspiration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from coming in. As far as our physical sight, that may not be in our hands. As we age, it becomes weaker and weaker. But our internal sight works the other way around. You have a very high potential, and as you grow older and grow older in faith, you have the potential of increasing the strength of the internal sight, the eyes of the heart. If the physical eyes become weaker and weaker as we age, our internal eyes need to become sharper and sharper as we age, because we have gained more knowledge and more taqwa. What is meant by dhikrur rahman? Dhikr is a very important concept in the Holy Quran and in the Ahadith. And there are different manifestations and examples of the concept of dhikr. One of the very important and most prominent examples of dhikr is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to in the Holy Quran. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun. So what is meant by dhikr here? The Holy Quran. So the most prominent example of dhikr, and dhikr is anything that reminds you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The timeless miracle of the Holy Quran, the timeless miracle of the Holy Prophet, the timeless miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that substantiates the trueness and the truthfulness of Islam is that very Holy Quran. Hence, it is a great example of dhikr. So one who gives the Quran a blind eye, one who ignores its commands, its prohibitions, one who does not give it attention, one who does not give it any type of care, alaykum salam, that person would be considered among those who have given a blind eye to the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another example of dhikr is salah. وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِذِكْرِي. And maintain the prayer for my remembrance. The salah, especially the 5 daily prayers, are a very, very clear manifestation of that which reminds us of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, one of the main purposes of salah is that it reminds us of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we are in our daily tasks, when we are prone to forgetfulness, we are prone to mistake, prone to sin, this salah brings us back on track and readjusts our compass, our internal spiritual and moral compass towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and towards His teachings. وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِذِكْرِي. Now here we have a couple of examples that I want to point out when it comes to the ayah, وَمَنْ يَعْشُ عَنْ ذِكْرِ الرَّحْمَنِ. One who gives blind eye, again blind internal eye, to the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be it the Holy Quran, be it salah, be it whatever reminds us of Allah, Allah shall assign or appoint a Satan that shall be the companion of that person who has chosen to give a blind eye to the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When a person is very neglectful towards their salah, the time of salah doesn't matter to them. It is not something that they really give attention to. This is an example of man ya'shu an dhikril rahman. A person who marginalizes religion in their life. What do I mean by marginalizing religion in one's life? Usually when you say someone is marginalized or something is marginalized, it's put in the margin. It's not as important. You know, when you read a book, the font of the margin is usually small. And where is it usually on top? No, it's usually in the bottom. So you say marginalized, it's not given the real importance. The real points are mentioned on the actual page itself. Margin, they might put a note here, reference here, put it in the bottom. When we say religion is marginalized in our life, what does that mean? It means that this person considers Islam to be an identity. They identify as a Muslim. But in their life, in their day-to-day tasks, Islam is marginalized. It's the last priority. Let alone that it is a priority. I would doubt that it's a priority or even on the list of priorities if it's marginalized. Alaykum salam. I wouldn't say that it's a priority if you marginalize it. It's the last on the list, meaning that the person would visit all types of thoughts and ideas in this life before pursuing anything, before they visit the teachings of Islam and the perspective of Islam on the matter which they want to pursue, for example, or go forward with. So marginalizing Islam in our life is an example of al-ashu, that blind eye that we give to the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's like saying, you know what, that's the last thing that concerns me, alaykum salam. That's the last thing that concerns me. It matters. For me, as long as this works for my dunya, this works for my personal interest, it works for my family, it works for my business, that's all that matters. What Islam says, that's if Islam is aligned with what I think is right and what is in my best interest, then good. I am Muslim and I'm proud of it. But if it's not, then sorry, it's going to have to sit to the side. I've seen situations, not necessarily here, but in other places in the world, and we've heard of many stories when people have a dispute among themselves. Dispute, monetary dispute, social dispute. And when they sit and somebody comes and tries to reconcile between them, one of the most evilest things that is usually said is put religion to the side. What do you mean put religion to the side? If you're a Muslim, we can't put religion to the side. We have to talk according to religion. They would tell you, look, put religion to the side. We're going to talk about this based on our culture, based on our common understanding, and that's it. Religion can be on the side. Religion can be left to the mosque. And that is a clear example of marginalizing Islam. Islam cannot be just put in the mosque. Islam starts at the mosque, but it does not end at the mosque. The mosque is a recharge hub for our religiosity. But that's not where religion is practiced only. Religion is practiced in all walks of life and everywhere we are. أَيْنَمَا تُوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. Wherever you go, there's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ومن يعش عن ذكر الرحمن نقيض له شيطانا فهو له قرين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الأول بلا أول كان قبله، والآخر بلا آخر يكون بعده، والصلاة والسلام على حبيبه طه الأمين، وعلى أخيه ووصيه علي أمير المؤمنين، وعلى البضعة الطاهرة الصديقة المظلومة الشهيدة فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين، وعلى سبطي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين، وعلى التسعة المعصومين أئمة المسلمين من ذرية الحسين علي السجاد ومحمد الباقر وجعفر الصادق وموسى الكاظم وعلي الرضا ومحمد الجواد وعلي الهادي والحسن العسكري والحجة الخلف القائم المهدي صلاة كثيرة دائمة. The verse that we were highlighting in the first sermon is وَمَنْ يَعْشُ عَنْ ذِكْرِ الرَّحْمَنِ نُقَيِّضْ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا فَهُوَ لَهُ قَرِينٌ. This verse raises a question. And whoever is blinded from the remembrance of the Most Merciful, we appoint for him a Satan, and he is to him a companion. Is that fair of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to appoint a Satan to befriend us and to be our companion, misguide us, and then Allah takes us to account and says that you're responsible for what you have done and therefore you deserve punishment? Why would Allah assign a Satan to me and to you, and then after we are misled, He says, you have followed Satan, therefore you're going to be resurrected with him in hellfire? The answer to that, my dears, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in other verses clearly says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن عبادي ليس لك عليهم سلطان إلا من اتبعك من الغاوين. Indeed, my servants, O Satan, you have no authority over them except those who follow you of the misguided ones. In other words, it is we as individuals, it is me on a personal level, for example, that chooses to befriend Satan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He says we appoint a Satan for him who gives a blind eye, it is a natural effect of ignoring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The example I'd like to use, because we are recently we have come out of the pandemic, right? During the pandemic, it was said to us that you have to wear a mask as a preventative measure to avoid contracting the virus. Well, if a person knows that there's a specific area that the virus has spread in, and they know that if they go in that area without any precautions, they are more than likely to contract the virus. If they decide to go there without the precautionary measure, without the mask, and then they contract the virus, could they say that the person that warned me of the virus is responsible for this? Because he says if you go there, you'll contract the virus without these precautionary measures. We say no, that person is not responsible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has warned us from the start. إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ فَاتَّخِذُوهُ عَدُوًّا. Verily Satan is an enemy of you, so take him as an enemy, don't take him as a friend. So one who gives a blind eye, and again we're talking about the internal eye, the spiritual eye, to the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ignores Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the natural effect is that Allah will abandon them and will leave them to Satan, and therefore Satan will come and be their close companions. And at that point, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not take any responsibility for the misguidance of humans who choose to follow the path of Satan. Oh Allah, we seek your protection from the promptings of Satan, and seek your protection, O Lord, from their presence near us. O Allah, we beg you, we ask you to keep us firm on the straight path. O Allah, we beg you and ask you to purify our hearts from all that which distracts us from your remembrance. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات تابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك قاضي الحاجات مجيب الدعوات بسيدنا ونبينا محمد عليه وعلى آله أفضل الصلوات.